So my life is a creative mess, and I'm not even 30 yet. But as I work with more individuals through ministry and business opportunities, I've realized that all of our lives are creative messes. If you don't have ups and downs in your life, I'm not even sure how you survive. But right now, I'm going to ask you to listen closely to my talk. I want you to listen for the moments when you feel confused and be aware of when you are at a loss for words. And then find ways to put stories together. Have you ever faced this challenge when working with an individual before? Did you write that person off? Or did you listen? Were you patient? And you actually believed what they said? This is often what it's like to work with someone who has little experience telling their story. So, like I said, my life is a creative mess, but it's also full of design. So ever since I remember, I've been in the creative field. I started working at the age of 3. My twin sister and I, we were often objects in videos, and we portrayed some kind of artistic scene for an artist. But as I've gotten older, I was inspired by my grandmother and many other mentors who taught me how to design and sew clothing. And today I still do some sewing, and I teach sewing as well. But I've also realized that art is a really important outlet for healing. So some can use art for objectification, but others can use it for positive social change. So through a lot of reflection, art, and healing, I finally realized what God has called me to do after I moved from rural America to the suburbs to the inner city, and now back to really, really rural America, where I'm surrounded by Amish farms. I've accepted my calling, and today I work with survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and trafficking. I really work with any women who experience oppression as well. In 2018, I started the ministry called Wildflower Enterprises, and art and storytelling are at the heart of this ministry. But this ministry intentionally opens the doors and lifts up a space for those who've experienced abuse. So we work with women in rural America, in Grand Bahama, and others in online spaces. And we're able to do this through the connection of the Methodist Church as well. But that's really the key point. Connection is key, because without connection, we're stuck in isolation. And when we are stuck in isolation, you're in this fear and this heartache, and you can't escape it. And that's when we cannot see the beauty and the chaos. So there's something really important to any survivor when you can start to hear and understand this statement: you are not alone. And I think when any ministry actually starts to teach this statement in some way or another, that's when the ministry unleashes itself, and we start to see chains breaking. In Wildflower, we do this through storytelling and design, and there are so many stories that make up our ministry. So in our local group, we often upcycle furniture, which is a really random thing that I enjoyed doing myself. And then I opened up a space in my garage, which is the parsonage as well. So I invited women, and women ages 18 to 80 came, and they came to the garage, and we upcycled these pieces of furniture, and we started talking. But one thing I realized is that women in this community all had something in common. Most were unemployed, or others could only find part-time work. So that told me that there was a lack of opportunities for women in the community, but also everyone was connected to the issues of domestic violence and sexual assault in one way or another. So we started to connect in these ways. Through the hard topics, we actually connected. And one of the most successful and actually first upcycled project that was completed by an open survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault. She created this design here. It's a wooden stool, and she painted it light blue and dark blue, And she did this for light, to represent light coming from darkness. As she painted this, I worked one-on-one with this individual, and she told me that she was beginning to heal. And this was our first design that was completed. And she said, "Kacie, I finally realized what my calling is." And this just filled my heart with joy. She said, "I want to be there for other people who've experienced things that I've experienced." And so I decided, let's continue to lift her voice. So what we do in Wildflower is we actually sell some of the art that's made to provide extra income opportunities for the women. So that stool was sold to a local middle school because I was connected to a health teacher, and the middle school students purchased a stool. We all went to the class. We gave a presentation for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And this individual got to tell her survivor story for the first time. And to this day, that stool is still on display with her story and resources at the school. So that's a pretty cool opportunity. But this individual also had the opportunity to share her story at our church. We had a local news outlet come to the church, and she shared her story for Domestic Violence Awareness Month just this October. And she's been baptized now. She's joined the church, and now she's one of my most active leaders in our group. And you know, her voice is so powerful, and her survivor voice is even more powerful. One day she said, "Kacie, I want to do our painting session on the front porch just because it's summertime and the garage just gets kind of dark." And I was like kind of questioning her, but she lives 2 doors down from me. So we went to her front porch, and the minute she offered her front porch and it was a success, the minute I thought her hospitality is alive, and she's reminding me of Lydia in the Bible. So this was a beautiful moment, and I realized the immense importance of letting the press lead and actually listening to survivor stories. But that's not the only story of Wildflower. One day I was actually connected to Grand Bahama. So in Grand Bahama, I attended a Methodist church, and I met a woman who's now one of my dear friends, and I started telling her about the work that I was doing with women in rural America and with art. And she said, "You have to meet this other artist." So after the church service, I met this artist who's a wonderful artist in Grand Bahama, and she said, "Kacie, at 3 o'clock on Thursday, I'm gonna pick you up, and I wanna show you around the island, and I wanna show you how nature has inspired my art, and I wanna show you all of my art." So before I could ask the pastor that I attended, that I was with, for permission, I was just like, "Okay, sounds good, pick me up at 3 o'clock. So Thursday came, she picked me up at 3 o'clock. I jumped in her car, and we began to ride around the island roads, and we were jamming to her gombe music, and she was talking. She was showing me the nature, but we also talked about the challenges that women face on the island. And we discussed the importance of entrepreneurship and the importance of using what you have around you to create art and to create some type of job as well. So today, Wildflower supports this artist in Grand Bahama, and I sell some of her artwork, and I'm also able to include the women in rural America in these conversations. So we have video chats, and we talk back and forth, and that's just a wonderful connection that we have. But you know, I got back to rural America after the trip to Grand Bahama, and I was riding in the car on the country roads and jamming to some old country music like Reba or something like that with the women that I work with, and I started to continue to feel how important connection was. And then I was like, this ministry is a creative mess. But what we're doing is we're actually lifting survivor voices and doing ministry in the most random places, like craft fairs. We go to churches, but we go to antique shops as well. So all these random places we go to, and I just call this creative advocacy. So after all of this, I finally realized in the small town of around 1,200 people is where my healing journey actually began as well, alongside all of these other women. These women hold me accountable to remember why I started this ministry in the first place and why I actually enjoy doing the work that talks about the topics of domestic violence and sexual assault. But I say I see hope because I say these stories and I talk about how connection is a beautiful thing, but I also often feel very angry because just because one positive statement is said doesn't mean that we have actually truly prevented abuse at all. And right now I'm heartbroken that there's an intersection between climate change and abuse, and some of the poorest women on our planet are being hurt the very most. And I'm angry that these are some communities that I have worked in and I know people at. But I'm also angry at the willfully blind communities in our world and the willfully blind churches as well that aren't even recognizing that abuse is happening in their own communities. There's a lack of services for survivors all over this planet, especially in rural areas. Counties, crisis centers where I live have had to close their doors because of a lack of funding, and that makes me angry. But also, those who don't have access to the crisis centers can't even get there. So I'm asking, where is the church in all of this work? And I continue to get angry that women that I work with who have been through hell have to continue walking on eggshells in their own community and their own church as well to do this type of work. Disclosing abuse is a very hard thing to do. So I've continued to ask, where is the church right now? I've met so many of you, we're all becoming friends. And I'm here today to ask you to join me in this because I can't do this work alone. I couldn't bring the women that I work with to this conference, but I'm bringing these stories to you because we're all Methodist and we're all in this connection together. So I hope that you're already doing something in your community to prevent the abuse crisis, or you're brainstorming right now how you can, because we really need to see the chains breaking. But like I said, the women that I work with hold me accountable. And they also hold me accountable to remember those things and the importance of this ministry. But they hold me accountable to be vulnerable as well. So a day that still haunts me is a day that I remember how closely related I was to all of the survivors and these issues that I'm working with every day. In my past job, I was driving around country roads and gravel roads and through valleys, and I was so busy teaching about consent and power and control and healthy relationships that I wasn't able or giving time to reflect on my own life. But during these drives, I would listen to the radio news, and I would hear the news of another famous perpetrator, and I would hear the news of the success of the Me Too and Church Too movements. But when I heard all of this, I felt so alone in my work. I wondered how all of these communities were having such success in lifting survivor voices, but I felt like I couldn't do it myself. Trump flags and bumper stickers were all around me, and this gave me a chill and a fear that I couldn't live with anymore. But then one day, as I drove into my town at the speed limit of 25 miles per hour, I remembered clearly. So I am a survivor. And many in my family are survivors. And I have seen the cycle of abuse way too many times. This fall, I felt that I was kind of going astray in my work, and I just wanted to stop doing what I was doing. But like I've said, all the women that I work with, they hold me accountable. And in vulnerability, I've realized it's extremely important. But I was lost in my own emotions and my own fears. And I think that's because you never truly forget a traumatic event that happened in your life. But you can choose to see it with new colors. And that's what this Wildflower ministry has helped me do. It's helped me see my own life in new colors. And as a leader, that's really what I needed. So wildflowers are the beauty and the chaos. All are unique, just like all of our stories. And this talk actually symbolizes the emotions of what it's like to work with survivors and advocates who are working with these issues every day. So right now, I'm going to ask you to stay with me in all of these stories, and we're going to lift up a prayer for all of those who have felt silenced or feel silenced right now. Feel what you need to feel right now, but for me, I'm going to reflect on my presence in my own community as I create the design that helped me grow Wildflower and the places that I work in. So the mountains stand around me like a wall, and it seems like I cannot escape. I listen for God's voice, and I breathe, and I vision something random. I vision a table in a rainstorm. Then the vision continues as I see a group of brave women sitting around a table that has new colors and a new meaning. The table has now become an open space that's helping others begin their walk through trauma. So this was actually a vision that I got before I started Wildflower, and the vision came true. And this is the table that was upcycled in my group, and a table that we often sit around often. So right now, let me continue telling you what happens in our upcycling sessions. The storytelling begins at the beginning and continues to unfold and get deeper, and there is a lot of hope. There's pain, fear, and trust throughout the entire process. First, there's drawing out the design, and that brings excitement and nerves as a story is beginning to be told. But second comes sanding. Sanding is often the hardest part because some of the darkest memories come to light. Third, applying the new coat of paint starts to create a new way to see dark moments. But then the design has a new path, and you have to decide if the new path is a positive path to take or not. You take the new path, and the design is completed, and it's telling a story. This is a prayer and a design that tells a story to save someone else's life, but also open up a space for someone else to begin their healing journey. So what I really liked in this conference is that song that we sang this morning and yesterday that talks about that we will all be free. And that's where I want to end this, that one day we will all be free. So, amen.